Welcome back to Bafflegab. Now we have an interview with Alexandra Kitty, whose new book is called When Journalism Was a Thing. Now, Alexandra, to prepare for this interview, I read the one article I could find written by you from 20 years ago as a PDF. And in that, I found that you took offense to journalism that kind of posits offering both sides equal time. And I just want you to know that the premise of this show is exactly that. Lenny is on the left, and I'm on the right. So before we get things started, I want you to say, which side are you going to be on so the listeners know where the bias is going to be coming from?
Well, I consider myself a radical centrist, so I would say both and neither.
Okay, radical. Centrist left or centrist right?
Centrist.
Okay.
Oh, well, there you go.
So then there will be no bias at all. We have right, left, and center all accounted for.
Great to get that, delineated right off the top. So your book, Alexandra, and thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. It's called When Journalism Was a Thing, and it begins with an open letter to journalists in North America where you write, quote, "You're working in a dead profession that you all had a part in killing. The time for denial is over. Journalism has been dead for a very long time. Deal with it." So my question is, can you pinpoint the moment in time where journalism was dealt this fatal blow?
I think there's several points of when it got sick. I mean, first when the internet exploded in a big way and people had a right to say what they wanted and bypass the press, and they never took that into account, which ended up weakening them until you had Trump win an election through Twitter.
Right.
I mean, which would have been absolutely unprecedented ever. I mean, you can think of Gary Hart when he wanted to run for president. He seemed to be, a shoo-in. One photograph in the press, that was it. And I mean, the change has been so dramatic that it's hard to imagine that somebody can win by Twitter.
Right.
But don't you think that kind of like erases a lot of sort of bias? Now you're getting things straight from the president's mouth or a presidential candidate's mouth. There's no like filtering. There's no way for it to be like lost in translation. It's like, this is what he meant. It's out there for everyone to see.
And that's like, let's say, one side of an issue, but everybody's so reactionary. There's no reflection. Well, what's this other side say? Or is there an exception to this? Or is what's really out there? So you have lots of raw data, but nobody to sort of be calm, analyze it, pull back and see a big picture of it. So I think social media did so much good, but we're still missing some element that needs to be brought in.
Right. For sure. And I feel like in the American context, when we talk about journalism, many people working in the media today seem nostalgic for the so-called golden age of journalism, roughly coinciding with the post-war era. Our current media landscape is obviously much different. Instead of 3 TV channels, we have thousands. It's fair to say the entire field has been decentralized and democratized. But I think some yearn for simpler times when facts were not up for debate, where people like Walter Cronkite demanded the utmost respect. So do you think this historical analysis is misguided? Was there ever a golden age of journalism?
I think there was a golden age, but I don't think it was for everybody. I mean, there were lots of people in the fringe who might have been portrayed a certain way that wasn't fair. So we had a golden age for some people, but it was a good ideal, but it wasn't, let's say, given to everybody equally.
Right. And, I feel like kind of related to that, the term fake news has really taken off since 2016 and, is pilfered from President Trump himself.
Created by him.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. But he obviously uses that label for opportunistic reasons, right? It's an easy foil for deflecting criticism, regardless of the merits. But the mainstream media has adopted this term to describe something else, namely alternative media on both the left and right, also known as their competition. I'm just curious, what's your take on fake news? Is this as recent a phenomenon as it seems to be?
Well, if we're talking fake news and being information that's wrong, we've had fake news in mainstream media. I mean, you had Janet Cook's Jimmy's World, you had Stephen Glass
Yeah.
in the New Republic. Everything there was fake news. I think it's a trigger word these days. It means whatever the person on whatever political side wants it to mean. Trump means, I guess, obviously anything that doesn't say that he's the best thing since sliced bread.
Mm-hmm.
And the press is, as you said, anything that's competition to them. So I don't think we have a word that's a trigger word, except it triggers different things in different people. So it's that mess. It's not like anybody has managed to grab that narrative and say, this is what this absolutely means.
Right.
Don't you think like the spread of this term fake news, it makes journalists work harder? Don't you think in this landscape under Trump that they're trying harder not to be seen as fake news, so they're working harder?
I think they are a little too blinded with their animosity toward him that, to me, how much news about Trump is there these days? And there's 7.4 billion people on the face of the earth. There must be other things going on right now that are probably going to, nip us in the butt eventually, because we have a press that's too obsessed with one person. I mean, his ego must be, over the moon. I mean, how many stories about him versus other people? I mean,
yeah.
This
well, it
is
should
where
be. He's the leader of the free world. He is, by definition like that, more important than
Stormy
all the
Daniels is the most relevant piece of news any given night.
I would prefer never to read another Stormy Daniels story.
I saw CNN has reported on Stormy Daniels 455 times this year, and the war in Yemen exactly 0 times. So obviously they're doing something right.
I think she might be the first porn star that people actually read the articles about. So
That's a fair analysis. That's good. Yeah,
that is true.
But I do think, but also like Trump does also kind of give them homework. This morning he tweeted, highest poll numbers in the history of the Republican Party. That includes Honest Abe and Ronald Reagan. There must be something wrong. Please recheck that poll. I've never seen a president tell, the journalists, the news, there must be something wrong. Can someone double check these numbers?
I mean, he's tweaking their noses through Twitter. I mean, as I said, this is an unbelievable, nice racket if you can get it with what he's done with Twitter. I mean, if everybody should be so lucky that he could say something and you have like thousands of people in a single profession just go in a tizzy, check everything, and he can do whatever he wants elsewhere.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's everything also with Twitter. It's all out there. Like, you can just kind of become a journalist on your own from like retweeting things, writing your own like Medium articles.
Yeah.
You can build
your personal brand.
Clout this way.
Yeah.
I think what has happened also is that mainstream journalists have become very lazy, right?
I think they've become very dejected. I mean, when you had a power to, let's say, have a scandal and people would have to resign and shame and there'd be laws changed. And then you say something now and people are like, well, I don't believe you. And they tweet it and other people like their tweet and retweet their tweet. That's, not something that they're used to. It's like, when you're a little kid and when your parent says something, you listen to them, and then you hit your teenage years and you realize, nothing's going to happen if you say, no, I'm going to do what I want to do.
Well, that's true. Yeah. But actually, there was a story recently that I feel was out there. Anyone could have broke this story, but an independent journalist broke the story, and there was consequences. This is the story about James Gunn and his tweets.
God.
So anyone could have gone to his Twitter page, Control F for child rape, found this, broke the story, but only Mike Cernovich did. He's the only journalist who took this story, found it, and broke it.
Twitter is just like an archive of, every, brilliant and boneheaded thought that's ever been here in the modern age. I mean, it's something. I mean, you can take it one way or take it another, but it's actually that has done an enormous public service in a lot of ways, because people can say, well, I never said that. And then you just go and check. You go, yes, you did.
So do you think, like, with that in mind, that maybe your book may have been better as a long Twitter thread?
I think it sort of was a long Twitter thread in a lot of ways, because as I was writing it, things were coming up constantly. So I was, doing it. But this is much more, let's say, gives me more time, more word space to say what I needed to say.
Right. And so, Alexandra, just to switch gears a little bit, you're from Canada, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You'll forgive me for that.
We'll try.
And your own prime minister, now I was looking this up, he has to tweet twice. He has to tweet in English and then in French every single time.
Not efficient enough for Ralph
It's not
Wigglesworth.
efficient enough. It seems like a
No,
waste of time.
no. I think he's made up for that by having lots of selfies in both official languages.
That's right. And especially in, the various traditional garb that he likes to wear when he's visiting India or other countries.
He's very fashionable.
Yes. And anyway, but what I wanted to ask is just what's different in Canada as far as the state of journalism goes? Do we have the same problems in Canada that we see in the United States, or is it a little bit better over there?
Oh, it's much, much worse. We've always had higher media concentration. We've always had bigger problems. I mean, we have almost very few news media owners. They are closing newspapers here, left, right, and center. They've been begging the government to bail them out for quite a few years. So actually, American journalism, as troubled as it is, it has nothing on what Canadian journalism is facing right now.
Yeah.
But don't you think that then you wouldn't be able to trust the newspapers? If the government were to bail them out, then you don't know, are they just repeating what the government's telling them to print?
Well, at least then they would get some sort of payment back for it. Yeah, but I mean, it's always been looking for a government to save you when the going gets tough. So this is what has been happening here. But the government's been very, let's say, slow to react. And what they've done has been such a pittance that it's like not having it at all. And we're still closing newspapers.
That's interesting. And do you have the same type of cable news ecosystem that we have in America? Because I feel like sometimes cable news channels here, they just get this, story and just milk it for all it's worth for a week at a time. Do we have that same type of opportunistic media system in Canada, or is it a bit more measured?
I think it's bit more pablum. We watch CNN, we have Fox, we get all of the American channels which do it better than us, obviously, but we have CBC, which is owned by the government, doing it, and we have various small news channels. I mean, not with the same, let's say, panache and showmanship as U.S. has.
Interesting.
It's kind of a shame that there isn't a morning show where Justin Trudeau can hear stories back. He can call in and they'll tell him what a great job he's doing.
Like Fox and Friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see that. Yeah, the Canadian Fox and Friends.
We had a Canadian Fox called Sun TV, but it sunk. I mean, this is how, if you can't rally the troops in this country for it and it's not profitable, it's what the state of affairs are here.
So your book is called When Journalism Was a Thing. Can you give us a year?
Oh, we were talking at the pinnacle of would be obviously Watergate. I mean, that was absolutely, I think, the crowning point of that profession, what they managed to do. I mean, even afterwards, you had, 60 Minutes doing so many good things way back, the 80s, 90s, and then it just sort of slowly started to erode because they couldn't catch the attention of people because they didn't need a middleman to say what they wanted to say or have pictures of stuff that they've witnessed in history.
Gotcha. I think Watergate was a little unfair of a time. I remember that's when Nixon told Roger Ailes that, there should be a media outlet that agrees with the president, is on the president's side. So thankfully we have
fair
that.
And balanced.
We have that now. To me, this was the birth of real journalism.
Yeah, Trump is maybe exemplifying that vision more than any other president.
Yeah. Well, also, speaking of Fox... Sorry.
Go on.
Speaking of Fox, you wrote the book of the documentary Outfoxed.
Right.
This was 2005. So
right.
Fox has still been going strong, right? It's still number one most watched.
Well,
day.
MSNBC is kind of, catching up in prime time with the demo.
Catching up, we'll see. But they've been colossal, But I mean, their viewership is so high. I think there was a story just this last week where it's the preferred channel of the First Lady when she's on Air Force One.
Wow.
The New York Times.
What an accolade.
That's a good get. I think that's a good get. Anyway, I do think your new book is going to have this same sort of reversal and is going to expedite the death of journalism.
I think it already happened, but Fox, they have their demographic, they have their core base, but it's but very partisan. I mean, it's it's the bedtime story for one certain group, the way CNBC is the bedtime story for another group.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And, their audience it's maybe 3 million people, peak time, and it's mostly older. So they might be dying out soon. I'm sure Fox will have a crisis of identity in the next 20 years or so. But, Ralph would hate that. I think that...
They're not just all going to die off. There'll still be more people getting older.
The next generation will come to take their place, I'm sure. We've already lost Bill O'Reilly and Eric Bolling, others.
And Roger Ailes, the king.
Yeah. Yes, of course. I mean, the earth lost him when he left us. God bless his soul.
There'll be new Bill O'Reillys, don't you worry.
Okay.
I mean, I also think that these channels would do good to kind of pay attention to some of the more, fringe journalists out there, like Mike Cernovich brought up earlier, Alex Jones, to give them shows on Fox News to kind of like help them stay relevant, to not lose out to these sort of like more internet journalists.
Mm. Is that what you see the future being? Legitimization of online journalists. I think that's interesting, Alexandra. Like, what do you make of the kind of decentralized, democratized media landscape we see today? Because I think it has some obvious advantages, right?
It has such enormous advantages. My only concern is that it's not, doing things, let's say, empirically. I mean, we could have a lot more experimental journalism. We could find ways of presenting facts and searching into facts, looking at them at all angles without, and we're not doing it. And so all these advantages can turn into disadvantages if we don't, let's say, have online journalism sources that bring a little more discipline than what journalists fail to do in their profession. Because if they had done that in their profession, I wouldn't have written this book. This journalism would still be a thing.
Right.
But don't you think that the current landscape with, again, to go back to my favorite topic, President Trump, is sort of making us question facts, right? So it used to be a thing where journalists would say, this many people were at the inauguration. He says, no, it was a different number. Now they have to go back, reanalyze this fact. This thing that would have been taken at face value any other time is now more closely examined.
Well, we could do that, or we can say, well, does it really matter how many people have attended this inauguration? We need stuff that, let's say, will maybe help my life or help your life, not necessarily how many people attended a protest.
It makes me feel good to know.
How do we know if it's a good president unless we know how many attended the inauguration? Because Obama was a great president, and I base that statement purely on his inauguration numbers, which were the biggest ever.
I will concede there were a lot of people at that inauguration.
Yes.
Well, whoever throws the better party, right?
Yes.
Right.
Pretty much.
I mean, if we really, I don't know. I think also, I'm not sure how much things have really changed, right? Because journalism used to be the boy on the street corner yelling, extra, extra, just gives you the news in a quick soundbite. That was basically a Twitter of the day, of like, here's
analog
the news.
Twitter.
Broken down. Yeah. It's an analog Twitter. It's the same thing. Now you just get push notifications, like, here's the news, like...
Just a little newsboy in your phone, essentially.
Yeah.
Sure.
Extra, extra, President Trump threatens president of Iran.
Go on.
Anyway, I'm just saying that... Sorry.
There's a question in there.
You can respond, Alexandra.
Okay, well, the newsboy just kind of was, just reading the news. He was just the messenger. It was the people behind it looking for certain information. And there's things we need to know, from employment numbers of a region to crime to poverty rates to how a law is going to affect us. That is usually less up for debate than, let's say, how many people were at a protest, especially if you had a whole bunch of people who are professional protesters and they'll show up no matter what's protesting. Then
George
what
Soros, cough, cough. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, that is an interesting point. But Ralph, was there a question there that you have, or you just want to talk about the newsboys?
Just wanted to talk about the newsboys, but I do think that it's like now the newsboy is the president. The president's now on the street the one saying, like, extra, extra, I'm threatening the president of Iran.
That's it. You have burned an image of my mind with him with a little newsboy cap now.
I think
that would be good. Somebody make a meme.
I think it's a good image. Yeah. So, I mean, it's like, what do we need? Would we even really need these sort of journalists? I mean, I guess you're saying also we could just print the numbers, like have someone just run the data. You're talking about like just a data analyst runs the numbers of, unemployment rate is this, this, and this, and just print that out.
Yeah, like a robot.
Well, there's also different laws on the books. You don't know how they'll affect you. You can talk about mortgage rates and stuff. There's things that people need to know, but they don't, let's say, know it because we're so obsessed with, do you hate Trump? Do you support Trump? That we're losing sight of things, the smaller things. A lot of people get upset for things that say that they're not federal, but they're state controlled. So they're getting upset at the federal government for something that, it's the governor who has, say over it, not the president. So I think there's a lot of different avenues and facets we're not really looking at because we're so used to looking for a narrative. This story, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Instead of going, well, what's this guy doing? I'll decide whether he's good or bad because maybe your interests are not the same as mine. They might clash. So let's see if we can hammer out something. I would like information, let's say, so you can negotiate with other people instead of constantly having, like slap fights with people who won't talk to you anymore because you're not applauding whoever they want you to applaud.
That's fair. I'm all for negotiating.
Mm-hmm. You're a deal maker. Yeah. Well, I think that given all we have discussed today and the myriad of problems in journalism, how do you think it could be changed? I mean, you talked a little bit about it just now, but will a less professionalized news media be better ultimately for the news-consuming public?
I think more literacy on how to gather facts would go a long way. The world's not the same as it was pre-internet, and you have a journalism that still operates on the same way they've operated before the internet, because before, audiences who were who they spoke to, now, which has been for the last 20 years, audiences are their competition. Mm-hmm. So it's totally different. So instead of having your these people as your competition, what is it that you can provide that they cannot provide, let's say, themselves on Twitter? Mm-hmm. Make a new niche.
So sorry.
Go on.
Do you think net neutrality is going to help in some of this? Because then they'll only have access to a couple of news sites.
You mean the absence of net neutrality?
The absence of net neutrality, yes.
Yeah, it's a confusing word.
I think if you are, if you're committed, you're passionate to finding information and you're focused enough, you can do it in war, you can do it in peace. Everything else almost is could be an obstacle. You could have all sorts of obstacles. If you're just set on, let's say, making a new standard of creating information to give to a public, I think none of that actually at the end matters because you never have a convenient time for anything. I mean, I think that it will, eventually I think there'll be a replacement for the model of journalism. I just think that we're sort of dragging our feet because you have one group of people who keep thinking it's going to go back to the horse and buggy, and another group of people, online journalists, who are sort of groping in their dark, creating it. They're going to be making the same mistakes. Eventually, someone's going to hit upon a solution that's profitable and works. I'm not pessimistic in that regard.
Yeah, I'm all for hunting and looking down information, people doing their own research. Hashtag QAnon.
I don't even want to know what that hashtag is referring to.
Look it up on Twitter.
Or don't. Anyway, I think that's all for us, actually.
Yeah, I want to thank you for coming on here, Alexandra Kitty.
It's a lot of fun. And, folks, buy her book, When Journalism Was a Thing, out now from Zero Books. I believe that's zerobooks.com. And do you have a website or social media handles?
AlexandraKitty.com should take you to everywhere you need to know about me.
All right. Great. Well, thanks again, Alexandra. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
All right. Talk to you later.
Okay, thank you.
So stay tuned. You're listening to Bafflegab. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm Guy speaking, nephew of University of London economist Guy Standing. While we don't always see eye to eye on politics, there is one thing we can agree on. Getting old sucks. but it doesn't have to. That's why I launched Hims, a pseudo-pharmacy startup that focuses exclusively on men's. You've probably seen our glossy minimalist Subway ads featuring phallic imagery like cacti, a banana, or even a big ol' eggplant pasted over a pastel color backdrop. Not picking up what I'm putting down? Let me spell it out for you. Hey millennial guys, you know your dick is gonna stop working soon, right? And don't even get me started on that swoopy haircut of yours. Pretty soon you're gonna be a fat bald schmuck with a broken dick, but don't worry, Hims is the solution for yous. Getting Hims is simple. Just go to our website, fill out a quick survey about your health, hobbies, favorite consumer goods, and your last 5 residential addresses. It'll take a little while, but that's just because we're thorough. Once you finish your survey, you just pay for your drugs and we ship them out. It's that easy. And we don't take insurance because we don't need those pencil pushers sticking their nose in our business. Hims even manufactures its own products using FDA-approved active ingredients that have recently gone off patent, so you know they're safe. And don't worry, Hims will never not sell all your personal information you gave us to third-party data brokers who will then resell that data to advertisers. So if you're watching YouTube videos with a lady friend and are served commercial after commercial about erectile dysfunction products, don't blame us. Hims, the only Instagram-cool gray market pharmaceutical startup for yous. Warning, Hims can cause serious side effects, including deformed dick syndrome, stomach bleeding, hearing loss, bleeding out of the eyes, nose, and throat, and delusions, such as thinking it's safe to buy PDE inhibitors from the internet.